Well, Prime Minister, good evening. Good to see you here in the LBC studio. You know what I'm going to ask you first? How's the throat?
I think it's okay. Certainly sufficient to be speaking to you here.
Thank goodness for that. Now, just take us through what was going on in your mind when you saw the man approach you on the conference stage last week.
Well, I suppose the thing is, I had a speech to give. I was giving the speech. I saw this person out of the corner of my eye. I had no idea what it was about. I had no idea who they were or what they were doing. I mean, there's a sort of moment where you think, has something gone wrong? Am I supposed to be stopping? But then I realised that obviously it was somebody not official there, and I thought I'd just carry on.
So at no time did you think, well, this man might be out to do me damage?
No, I honestly didn't think of that at the time. I know some people have questioned, was it right for somebody to get so close to the Prime Minister? But that didn't go through my mind when I saw him.
And then Freddie the Frog came, didn't he? And quite a way.
And all his friends and relations, I think.
What went through your head then? Because this, I mean, it's any politician's worst nightmare. And I mean, I've had it in the studio here from time to time when you think, oh my God, I've got to get through this. But you had to get through it for the next 40 minutes. What was going through your mind there? Did at any time you think, no, I'm going to have to stop?
No, I honestly didn't think that at any time. And I suppose the reason I didn't think it was because there was a lot I wanted to say. I mean, I think, the things I was talking about in the speech, things like, what we're doing on housing, student finance, the energy price cap, mental health, these were important issues that I wanted to talk about. And the overall thrust of the sort of government I want to be, of creating a country that really does work for everyone, what drove me when I became Prime Minister, as I said, in Downing Street. So that drove me to carry on with the speech. Obviously, from time to time, I did wish I'd put some more cough sweets in my pocket, but
well, Philip Hammond helped you out on that, didn't he?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I should reveal this on air, but I think somebody helped Philip Hammond out to help me out.
Oh, really? Who was that?
I'm not sure. I think
could have been Boris. You never know. What did your husband Philip say to you afterwards?
Oh well, he was obviously feeling for me as anybody would in that circumstance. I think he'd been a bit worried about the individual approaching me. As I say, probably more so than I had been in my position up there on the podium. And as everybody now knows, he gave me a really big hug because he just wanted to say, well done for getting through it.
Did you feel you needed it?
Well, I think I probably needed a stiff drink afterwards.
I bet you had one. Let's go to the first call. Helen is in Horsham. Hello, Helen.
Oh, hello, Ian. Hello, Prime Minister.
Hello, Helen.
Hello. My question really is, it's a bit like what Ian was just saying. Why on earth didn't you have some cough remedies with you on stage? You didn't seem very prepared for the speech, knowing it was such an important speech and it was going to go on for so long, and you had been struggling with your voice for several days. Well, I just wonder why you didn't have cough linctus with you, which would be much better, or some honey, some Mancunian honey or something, to soothe your throat.
Well, I'm not really able to use honey that much because I'm diabetic, so but I had cough sweet before I went on and had some cough medicine earlier, so I suppose I just thought that it would probably be okay. I think the problem was, by definition, these party conference end of conference leader speeches are long, and of course, although I'd been giving other speeches during that conference week, I hadn't given one as long as that. But thankfully, not only obviously Philip Hammond passed me a cough sweet, and obviously one of the somebody came onto stage and gave me a packet as well.
But it isn't the problem here that, having spent the previous 3 months talking about being strong and stable and the government being strong and stable, after that speech you looked the opposite. You looked weak and wobbly, and some of your colleagues have taken advantage of that.
Well, honestly, the impression I'm getting from people on the doorsteps, and I've been out there, is kind of a sort of good on you for carrying on. And I think leadership and the strength of leadership isn't about one speech. It's not about when you cough when you're giving one speech. It's actually about what you're doing for people. That's what the speech was about, and I think that's what leadership is about.
I talked about one of your colleagues maybe taking advantage of it. How would you describe your feelings towards Grant Shapps?
Look, I have parliamentary colleagues who have a variety of views in this world. I think what's important is that we get on with the job in government, and that's what we're doing.
You use that phrase a lot, get on with the job. I hope that can be the only one in this interview. But you must have been bitterly angry with Grant Shapps. He's a former party chairman. He knows how important loyalty is, and yet he's exhibited gross disloyalty. You must have some feeling towards him. Look,
I take a very simple view in politics, and I've taken it ever since I came into politics. And I remember being challenged by somebody when I think when I first went onto the front bench, saying that wasn't the fact that I tended to be very loyal and believed in loyalty, going to be a problem for me? Now, I don't think so, because actually I think when you're in Parliament, when you're in a party, you should have any disagreements, any arguments, any discussions about policy, about the way the party's going, have those in private. And there will be differences of opinion. You sort those out, and then you ensure that you're working together and people support the leadership. I think that's what people should do.
We've had lots of calls. We've been talking about the racial disparity audit over the last hour, and some deeply worrying calls, actually. We're going to move on to that now, because we've got lots of people who want to talk to you about that. Louise is in Hitchin. Hello, Louise. What would you like to ask the Prime Minister?
Hello, Prime Minister.
Hello, Louise. Hello.
Hello. Now, the report being publicised and being published is, of course, a positive thing, and it's brought to the fore issues that ethnic minorities, myself included, have been aware of for some time in it. But this is really more of a rhetorical question. I wanted to ask you, do you believe that there is the will within British society to want to change? Because quite honestly, I feel and I believe that racism is pathologically entrenched in this country. I really do. And I think it's all very well having a report that addresses these issues that we're aware of in any event. People like myself, my family and my friends. You'll have a myriad of black people, of Asian people ringing you up saying, we know this already.
So, Louise, what's your question?
Yeah, the question is, do you believe that there is the will within British society to want to change?
Okay.
Yes, well, yes. Look, this is not going to be something that's going to happen overnight, Louise, and it is something that will take time. I think the important thing about publishing the data today is not just publishing it, but it's actually what we're going to do off the back of it. But it is important that it's come together, that we're showing this picture, and it does, in some areas, it does make uncomfortable reading. And I was interested in the reference you made. I wonder, have you had particular experience in a particular area that leads you to your concern about whether society will change?
Louise seems to have disappeared, I'm afraid, so we can't go back to her. Let's go to Margaret, who's in Harrow. Hello, Margaret.
Hello, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I'm just calling because I have a few issues. I want to try and go through them as quick as I can, because I'm aware that you have got phone calls to attend to. So I'm of African descent. My parents are African. I actually changed my surname from my dad's surname, which was an African surname, to my mum's surname, which is an English surname. I got married, and I'm married to someone who has an English surname as well. My husband's workplace also discriminate, unfortunately, against people who have an African surname or a name they can't pronounce, and unfortunately have turned people away because of that, and I haven't even got to interview stage, or if they have got to interview stage, they've been turned away. And also, after getting the job, I was told that the assumption was made that I was Caucasian, and that was the assumption. And then another thing as well is that people that I know studied incredibly hard and have had to change their name. For example, a lady I know had to change her name from Bricky to Belinda so that it's easier to pronounce and so that she would actually get a job. I just want to know what will you do to resolve the issue to prevent my children and other black and ethnic minority groups from experiencing this racism?
Well, Margaret, I'm really sorry to hear about the experience that you've been through. And as you probably know, sadly, you're not alone in this. And I think this is one of the things that's come home to me. A number of things, if I can, in response to what you've said. I mean, first of all, there are some employers who are already actively trying to ensure that they don't there isn't any inadvertent bias in their employment practices by having sort of name-blind CV applications, so that there isn't any that sort of attitude that says a certain name is less likely to get a job.
Do you think that should be extended beyond the employers that do it already? Is that something that you would think about legislating for?
Well, I hope, I'm not sure at this stage about legislation, but what I would hope, and this is one of the things that I was going to come on to say to you and Margaret and other listeners, is one of the issues here is about how we as government respond, but I hope that the very publication of this information will actually lead others to see that there's an issue for them too, and employers being one of that. I had a number of people from different groups who've been working in race equality issues for a number of years at Number 10 this morning, meeting, one of the issues that came up was this whole question of getting people into employment and the attitude that employers have. So I think there are things we can do about it. I mean, one of the things we're going to do is, for example, we're going to do some consultation on the question of requiring employers to show ethnicity pay gaps. We do, employers show gender pay gap. We want to look at ethnicity pay gaps as well. But we also want the very proactive things government will do is we're going to identify 20 hotspots where there's particularly high unemployment rates for people from BME communities and put extra effort into those hotspots, mentors, people working with individuals to help to get them into the workplace.
I was talking to David Lammy earlier, the Labour MP for Tottenham. You commissioned him to do a report on ethnic minorities, how they're treated in the criminal justice system. He suggested to me that affirmative action might be needed in some areas, not every area. Is that something that you as a government would consider doing if it were needed?
Well, I think I think there are a number of areas where we're already looking at taking active steps, which you might call that sort of affirmative action, and working with others. Well, let you give you an example of one of the things that I encouraged when I was Home Secretary, working with the Metropolitan Police to increase the number of people from black and minority ethnic communities coming into the police force. And there's a number of things they did, and what they did is they looked at their recruitment method and they decided there were certain parts of the system that wasn't intentional, but did seem to have a bias against people from BME communities, and so they changed that. And I, as Home Secretary, actively encouraged them to do that, set up a scheme for direct entry into the police at higher levels, which saw far more BME community, people from BME backgrounds coming into the police. So there are some active things we can do.
What about making blind
important.
CVs compulsory? I mean, that would be a real statement of intent, wouldn't it?
Well, yes. I mean, I suppose I just haven't looked at the possibility of that sort of blanket legislation in this area. We've seen employers actually taking it up. I naturally prefer employers to actively want to do something themselves. And, sometimes you can appear to solve an issue with legislation, but what you really need to get at is the attitude behind that. And simply requiring employers to do something by legislation doesn't necessarily change their attitude. And if I could just on this, Ian, because I think it's quite important, just to give that police example, when I sat down with people from the Black Police Federation and others to talk about BME community members in policing, they said, yes, some work's been done to get us into policing in the first place, but actually it's not just getting in. It's what happens when you're in the workplace and how you're treated in the workplace. So you have to change the whole attitude.
But could you not make a start maybe with bigger companies and sort of, or at least do some sort of pilot project somewhere to prove that it works? Because I think a lot of people are going to look at this audit and think, well, that's all very well. This is an audit. It's not a set of proposals. It's not a set of solutions. But if nothing is acted upon, then people are going to feel let down.
Absolutely. No, your fundamental point that this is not just about publishing a set of data and saying, that's it, job done. Absolutely not. This is the starting point. This is the first point of what we have to do. But the key thing is that what all this information does is it brings it all together and it shows what people from communities know themselves because it's been their experience, but others have not recognised. And now the question is what we do next. And we've already identified some areas, like the Education Department's going to do a review of exclusions because of the higher proportion of black boys who were excluded from school, for example.
I want you to talk to Carl, because Carl phoned in the last hour, and I asked him, after I'd spoken to him, I was really affected by what he said, and I said, would you like to speak to the Prime Minister? He naturally said yes. He's on the line now. It's Carl in Camberwell. Carl, tell the Prime Minister some of your experiences and what you think she ought to be doing.
Well, my experiences in terms of racism, I would personally say that racism has improved a lot in, say, the last 10, 15 years. I experienced racism by the police. I've been arrested for something I've never ever done before. I never got an apology or anything like that. So I believe that on that front, which I've mainly experienced, it has improved. Obviously, there is work to be done, but I believe it's improved. One thing I did mention to you before when I rang up is I said, me personally, I'm mixed race, right? So I don't know if it's a good thing that I can see things from both sides, because I don't class myself as black, I don't class myself as white, I'm both. So I kind of look at it from both sides. Now, what I see is a lot of racism coming from within the media. Now, you're talking about the audit that you've done, Theresa. Why don't you do one why don't you do it on the media? And let's have a look at the percentage of stories and figures that are, that are portraying black and ethnic minorities in a negative way. And when you've done that audit and you blatantly see that there is a lot of racism, why don't we do something about it? Because at the end of the day, that is where everyone's getting their information from on a large scale. So until we change the whole perspective of things, I don't think things are going to change that much. It's all good about looking at the little things, but let's look at the big thing.
All right.
Right. Well, thanks very much, Carl, and thank you also for saying that you think things have improved in the last 10 to 15 years, because I think that is right. I think what today's figures show is there's still problems, we've still a lot more to do, but it's not an entirely bleak picture, it's uncomfortable, but we should recognise where things have improved. And I'm sorry to hear about your experience with the police, and obviously we've been doing some work to try to improve people's from BME communities' experience with the police in a number of areas. Interesting point about the media, because one of the issues that has come to me from a number of people, I spoke to a number of young people yesterday at Dunraven School in South London, and about the experience that they had, and one of the issues they were talking about was lack of role models, not seeing people from BME communities, for example, as judges, and in senior positions in workplaces, and the impression that gives. And actually the media's got a role to play there. Because if they show those positive images, then that helps to show, I think, a picture of a country that truly is a country that's working for everyone, where people can get on regardless, and that's what I want, people to get on regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their background.
When you look at the stop and search figures, and when you were Home Secretary, you asked the Metropolitan Police and other police authorities to change their attitudes to stop and search, and the figures have come down. But the Metropolitan Police are clearly still at odds with you on that. They would like to do more of it. But we do lots of phone-ins on that subject, and you get dozens and dozens and dozens of people who say, I am stopped literally every week or two, and it's still happening. What can you do about that?
Well, we'd still have to be working on this. I think the first message I would give is that stop and search is a useful tool for the police, and it's important that they're able to use it, but they must use it properly. And one of the reasons
they're not, are they? That's the problem.
One of the reasons I wanted to change the way stop and search was being used was because there was an inspectorate report that said that about 25% of stops and searches were effectively being conducted illegally. Now, this should not be happening.
But it is still, isn't it?
Well, it has come down. I think the figures are quite striking. I think in some areas the number of black people being stopped and searched has come down by about 2/3, but we need to make sure that stop and search is always being used properly, is always being used in the right way, that communities are involved in its use, and we continue to work on this. But I think one of the important things for me is not just about stop and search, because I passionately believe you should not be stopped and searched on the streets of this country simply because of the colour of your skin. But it also has an impact on people. And, when I was at conference, I spoke about a young man from London, Alexander Paul, who sadly died following a brain cancer earlier this year. But he came to speak to our conference. He came to see me in the Home Office, talked about his experiences, the number of times he'd been stopped, and spoke at our conference. It was hugely inspirational, because people actually suddenly saw this was somebody whose life had been affected by this.
But why should anyone think the Conservatives are the party for ethnic minorities? Only 6% of your MPs are from an ethnic minority background. You've got 2 cabinet members, that's 7%, who are from an ethnic minority background. Should you not be leading by example?
Well, we have increased the number of our MPs from black and minority ethnic backgrounds. But I would say, actually, to any community across the country, actually look at what we're doing. Look at what I've done as Home Secretary on stop and search, on the treatment of...
But they do, and they still don't vote for you. If they had voted for you in the same way that white communities voted for you, you'd have a 42-seat majority now.
Yes, and there's no, I've said it before, the election didn't turn out in the way that I'd wanted it to. And we do have more work to do in reaching out to certain communities. But you challenged me as to what it is that we should do. As a party, of course, we need to ensure that we've got some great new MPs from black and minority ethnic backgrounds, like Kemi, who introduced me at party conference. But we've also need to ensure that what we're doing in policy, how we're delivering for people, is affecting and improving their lives.
In your appeal to ethnic minority communities, in 2010 you had 13 of the 75 most diverse parliamentary constituencies. In 2015 that number went down to 9. In 2017 it went down to 5. That's not the right direction, is it?
No, and we want to go in the other direction, Ian. You're absolutely right. I'm not saying that we don't have work to do as a party. Of course we've got work to do as a party. But what I'm saying is, what you said to me is, how do you appeal? And I think there's appealing on different levels. One is it's about how welcoming the party is to people from different communities and different backgrounds. And I think that's important. We've made some steps, but we need to go further. But the other is what we do as a government to help people. And this racial disparity audit, it's one of the first things I did when I became Prime Minister, was to commission this audit, precisely because what I'd seen when I was Home Secretary, I thought there was a problem out there. We needed to identify it, because until you properly identify it and show it to everybody, then you can't hope to deal with it. And that's the next stage, is dealing with it.
Have you personally suffered discrimination of any kind in your life?
I've not felt discriminated against.
Not as a woman?
Not as a woman.
In politics, in selections, anything like that?
No, honestly, I didn't. I can honestly say that. I have colleagues whose story is a different one.
But do you therefore think you can understand people who have, every day of their lives, experienced discrimination?
Well, I hope I do understand it, and that's what has led me to get this audit undertaken, to get these figures put together so that the whole country can see. And I think often, one of the things I've heard this morning is somebody saying, we come forward with our stories, with the experience we've had, but actually a lot of people are in denial about this. What this racial disparity audit does, what this framework, these figures about ethnicity and the treatment of people from different with different ethnicities by public sector does, is actually shows the facts and figures. Nobody can deny it, because these are the facts.
Let's move on to Brexit, shall we? I'm sure you were expecting that to come up. Nina is in Islington. Nina, what would you like to ask the PM?
Yes, hello. I'm a EU citizen, and I have been living in the UK for 31 years. I'm extremely worried about my future. And my question is, in case of a no-deal scenario, will the proposal of settled status be withdrawn? And could EU citizens therefore end up losing their rights and even be deported?
Well, first of all, Nina, obviously what we've been focusing our attention on is the rights that you and others as EU citizens would have here in the UK once we've left the European Union, and getting a reciprocal arrangement for UK citizens living in EU member states. But my message has always been the same right from the beginning. We value the contribution you made. I think you said you've been here for 31 years, was it?
31 years, yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Now, I'm particularly just worried about this no-deal scenario. I know that you really want to try to get a good deal, but what would happen in the case, and you released a white paper on this yesterday, what is your backup plan for EU citizens in case of a no-deal?
Yes, well, as I say, we're looking at the... we want you to stay. That's the basic message. We want to ensure that you can stay in the UK. Obviously, the reason we're having these discussions with the EU is because once we leave the EU, if we've got an agreement with them, then it's about how there's that reciprocity of treatment. But we want you to be able to stay, and we want you to be able to contribute to our society.
But can you guarantee that Nina and all the millions of people like her under a no-deal situation would be able to stay with the same rights that they enjoy at the moment?
Well, we will. The rights that we've looked at the moment of people staying when we've got a deal with the European Union, and that's what we're working at.
But we're talking about no deal here.
No, yes, I know you're talking about no deal, and that's why what I'm going to say to Nina is that we will look at the arrangements that we would put in place in relation to no deal. We're doing work on that at the moment. Government across the board is doing work on that.
But why can't you just say, Prime Minister, and I mean, we talk about this all the time on the programme, and every time I talk about it, my switchboard lights up with people like Nina from all sorts of countries who've come here, made their lives here. They do valuable work in our economy. We value them, and you've said that yourself. Why can you not sit down here and say, of course you will be able to stay under any circumstance?
Well, I'm going to get a bit technical here, Ian, and I'm sorry about that. Yeah, but the point is that there are certain things, certain rights that pertain to somebody who's an EU citizen here in the UK by virtue of being an EU citizen. Things like the benefits that they're able to access in relation to their home country and in relation to the UK. Some of those issues, of course, would fall away if there was a no deal, because there wouldn't be an agreement between us and the European Union about how those things would be looked at. So we'd have to look at those issues separately in a no deal scenario. That's why I say we're working on what we would look at in a no deal. But my overall message is I want EU citizens to stay here in the UK, and I want to be able to guarantee those rights and to be able to enable people to stay. We're not going to be throwing EU citizens who are currently here in the UK out of the UK in the future.
What about the 1.2 million British citizens? What happens to them under a no-deal situation? Because you might very well encounter the EU becoming very trenchant about their attitudes to them in a no-deal situation.
Well, exactly. We don't know what would happen to them. The EU member states would have to consider what their approach would be to those UK citizens. As Nina herself said.
A lot of people listening to you over the last couple of minutes on this, they would be incredibly worried about their positions. I mean, friends of mine who live in Spain and who I know are listening to you at the moment, they're going to think, well, what happens to us?
But the point, and this is one of the reasons why we want to get a deal, Ian, is under a deal and under the citizens' rights arrangements that we've got in a deal.
You're the one who keeps talking about no deal.
No, I'm not the one who keeps talking about no deal.
You have done it. You did in the Commons yesterday.
Yes.
You've got teams of people working on it.
We have teams of people working on every possible outcome. We have teams of people working. You would expect the government to prepare, because we don't know what's going to happen. We're working really hard to get a really good deal. We don't know what's going to happen. And at the end of that, if there is no deal, then we have to be prepared for it. That's what I've said, and that's what people would expect the government to do.
What are we to make?
Can I just, because...
Sure.
But by definition, if there isn't a deal, then of course we won't have been able to agree with the European Union what happens to UK citizens currently living in countries like Spain and Italy and other members of the European Union. So we are focusing all our effort on getting a good deal. We're very close to agreement on citizens' rights that have gone into the really, some of the complexities around some of the issues that we need to address. In the speech I set out in Florence a couple of weeks ago, I made another offer to the European Union about how we could guarantee the rights of people like Nina living here in the UK once we've left the European Union.
What are we to make of the story that's broken in the last half an hour? Brexit talks held up by absent British negotiating team. Apparently the EU negotiators say that Britain's negotiating team can't make meetings tomorrow, so they're not going to happen.
There's been an agreement about when meetings are going to take place. We have seen throughout the summer comments from the European Union about how it's claiming that the UK's been ill-prepared. Actually, the UK has been exceptionally well-prepared. We've published, I think it's now 14 different papers over the summer on different aspects of our future relationship.
Turning up to negotiate tomorrow?
They've been negotiating today, and they'll be negotiating in the rest of the week. And the agreement,
the story is completely wrong.
An agreement has been made with the European Union as to when negotiations are going to take place. We're abiding by that agreement. That's all. That's what I say. In fact, the negotiations taking place this week are partly taking place because the United Kingdom say we wanted them.
Have the European Commission made this story up, that your negotiators are actually scheduled for talks tomorrow?
No, I believe that talks have not been scheduled tomorrow.
They say they have.
No, I believe talks were not scheduled for tomorrow. But can I just repeat the point I've just made? The fact that talks are taking place at all this week is partly because the UK said we thought they should.
OK, let's go to Mike, who is in Lincoln. Hello, Mike. What would you like to ask?
Hi, good afternoon, Prime Minister.
Good afternoon, Mike.
I'd like to ask, do you think George Osborne's using his position as the editor of the Evening Standard to undermine the government's attempts to move forward with Brexit?
Well, look, George has chosen to adopt a new career as editor of the Evening Standard.
Forced by you?
And he chose to step down as a member of Parliament.
You did sack him.
Yeah, he was a member of Parliament, and he chose to step down as a member of Parliament, and he's taken on this new career. And obviously, we believe in a free press. But government's going to get on with its job. Don't worry. Government's going to deliver Brexit. We're going to leave the EU in March 2019.
When he described you as being sliced up or diced up in his freezer, when you heard that, what did you think?
Look, I've quite a few people over the years have called me an ice maiden, but I did think George was taking it a bit too far.
He was sitting in that very chair the week before the referendum when I asked if he had a plan for Brexit. Just listen to this.
Well, I'm afraid that is the reality that Britain would face.
Seriously?
Britain does not have a plan for Brexit, right? We have an immediate, We will have to deal with immediate financial stability consequences, but they could be potentially very difficult for the country. And then you're quite right. Britain doesn't have a plan for Brexit.
How costly has that lack of preparation been?
Well, I don't think it's been costly in the sense that, of course, the negotiations didn't have to start straight away. Negotiations only started when we triggered Article 50, and I took a deliberate decision, the government took a deliberate decision, that we would not trigger Article 50 until we'd been able to spend a few months working on the arrangements that would need to be put in place. I think that was the right thing to do, and I think that's been borne out by the negotiations so far.
You were sitting in David Cameron's cabinet, very senior member of it. Did you know that no preparations were being made? Did you know the Treasury hadn't got a single civil servant preparing for Brexit, even though the polls showed it was 50-50?
I think there was an assumption that the no preparations were being made, and obviously we knew when George had told everybody on your programme.
Well, when did you last speak to George Osborne?
Oh, gosh. I honestly can't remember.
Was it the moment you told him his services were no longer required?
No, it wasn't. I've spoken to him since on a number of occasions.
If there was a Brexit vote now, would you vote Brexit? Because you voted Remain in the referendum. Have you changed your mind?
Well, I don't answer hypothetical questions, but it's
a pretty easy answer. I would be able to answer that. I know I would vote in exactly the same way.
Well, I voted Remain. I voted Remain for good reasons at the time, but circumstances move on. I mean, I think the important thing now is that I think we should all be focused on delivering Brexit.
Absolutely.
And delivering the best deal. But you're asking me to say, how would I vote in a vote now against a different background, a different international background, a different economic background,
but you can't
potentially?
Tell me that you would vote leave now. I mean, Jeremy Hunt, when I interviewed him at the conference, he said he voted Remain in the referendum. He's the chief advocate of Remain. He said now he would vote for Brexit because he says George Osborne's economic predictions did not come true, and he said that he was fed up with the belligerent attitude of the European Commission. Now, if he says he could change his mind, I don't quite understand why you can't, seeing as you are Prime Minister leading us into Brexit.
Yes, and I'm Prime Minister ensuring that I'm going to deliver Brexit for the British people.
But you can't tell me that you would now vote leave in a referendum.
Because I think, Ian, when you come, I could sit here and I could say, I'd still vote Remain or I'd vote Leave, just to give you an answer to that question. I'm being open and honest with you. What I did last time round was I looked at everything and came to a judgment, and I'd do exactly the same this time round. But we're not having another referendum, and that's absolutely crucial. We're not having another referendum. We are going to deliver on the vote of the British people, and we're going to deliver Brexit.
Okay.
29th of March 2019. We come out of the European Union.
Now, we did agree half an hour. Would you take a few more calls?
I can take a couple more calls.
Okay, great. Let's go to Andy in Newcastle. Hello, Andy.
Thanks, Ian. Hello, Prime Minister.
Hello.
Prime Minister, I'm a Conservative Party member, and I'm concerned. We're on course for a guaranteed Corbyn win at the next election. Can't you see the only slim chance we've got of avoiding that is fresh leadership? And the longer you cling to power, unfortunately, the more you increase the certainty we'll all be under hard left socialism of Corbyn.
Well, first of all, I agree with you. We don't want to see Jeremy Corbyn getting into number 10 Downing Street. I think that would be disastrous for the country. I think it would be disastrous for our economy. I think the important thing is the next general election will be in 2022. I think before then we've got to ensure that we get on with what the British people have asked us to do, which is delivering on Brexit, but also setting out that domestic agenda which I set out when I first became Prime Minister.
Is it still your intention to lead the Conservative Party into the next election?
Ian, I've been asked this question many times, and the answer has not changed. I can tell you that.
I just wondered if the events of the last week might have changed it at all.
No, look, I'm not a quitter, and there's a long-term job to be done here, and I still passionately believe in the message that I set out on the steps of Downing Street when I first became Prime Minister. That's the agenda and the mission for this government. That is what, I think, if you look at what we announced at Party Conference, that's what the Party Conference was about. It's important that we obviously have to deliver on Brexit for people and get it right, but it's also important, I think, that we address the issues in our society, in our country, that still need to be addressed, like those that have been shown up today by the racial disparity audit.
Are you going to conduct a reshuffle in the next few weeks? That's all the speculation.
Yeah, and everybody can speculate away to their heart's content. But look, I'm ensuring that the government is doing the work that the British people want the government to do.
What does Boris have to do to get his own P45? Because he's been rank disloyal over the past few weeks. You know that. I know that. I know that he is your Foreign Secretary, but he must have led you to be incredibly frustrated over the last few weeks.
Look, Boris is Foreign Secretary, and I appointed him as Foreign Secretary. And actually, as with every other member of the Cabinet, Boris agreed with the policy that we developed, that we discussed, that we promoted in relation to Brexit, that I set out in my speech in Florence.
Callum is in Northampton. Hello, Callum.
Hi there. Hi, Prime Minister.
Hello there, Callum.
Hi, I'm 17 years old and also a member of the Conservative Party, which is quite weird. But I was wondering, what is the Conservative leadership going to do to prove to people of my generation that you are a viable alternative to Labour and Corbyn?
Well, thank you, Callum, and thank you for being a member of the Conservative Party. And I think one of the things I would want to do is encourage you and others of your age to help us as me as Conservative leader and others in the leadership in the party to actually ensure that we can get our message across to young people. And I think one of the important things is that, and it goes back to something I said to Ian earlier, I want to show people by what we do, by how we deal with the issues that are of concern to people. Things like housing. Obviously, we've made some key announcements on that recently. I want to help more young people get their foot on the housing ladder, but also help those who are renting, give some more security to those who are renting. On student finance, obviously, we've made a couple of announcements about changes like raising the salary point at which you start repaying the loan, but we're going to have a major review of student finance. And then there's just the more general issue of I want to ensure that young people like yourself are able to see a better future. I worry when I hear from young people that who worry that their future's going to be worse off than their parents were.
What do you say to people who say that you're offering to younger people, not necessarily only people Callum's age, is a bit Labour light? It's a pale imitation of what Jeremy Corbyn's offering.
No, look, what Jeremy Corbyn does is he goes out and makes lots of promises, some of which actually to students he's backtracked on already since the election. He goes out and makes lots of promises and never tells us how he's going to pay for them, and he wouldn't be able to deliver them. What we know is that when we stand up and say we're going to do something like the money we're putting into housing, like the changes to student finance that we've already announced, we know we can deliver on that. And I think that's what's important. We can do that because we take a balanced approach to our economy. We recognise the need to deal with our debt. We also recognise the need to ensure that we're being fair to taxpayers.
Callum, are you convinced?
I'm partially convinced, yeah. I think one of the things that got me, for people my age, especially talking to a lot of my friends, was that Corbyn's policy with the university tuition fees. I know that you, Prime Minister, have recently put forward an alternative policy to that, but I think a lot of my friends look at Corbyn's policy compared to yours and find that more appealing. Even though personally I don't agree with scrapping tuition fees, I think they look at that and prefer his policy to yours, if that makes sense.
Well, no, I appreciate the point you're making, Callum, because of course what he said, Jeremy Corbyn said, is people won't have to pay fees. But, you know, let's look at what that means. What it means is that an 18-year-old electrician is going to have to pay through his taxes for perhaps somebody living up the road who's been to university and is earning more and has better career prospects. And I think, given that university does give people that advantage, that likelihood of being able to earn more during their life, I think people who are graduates should make a contribution.
Callum, thank you very much for your call. A couple of quickfire questions before you leave as Prime Minister. BAE Systems have announced nearly 2,000 job losses today. What's your reaction to that?
Well, obviously this is an extremely worrying time for people employed by BAE. I mean, the government will be working very hard to work with the company and work with those who will be losing their jobs to ensure that we can help them into alternative employment. Obviously, one of the things that the government has been doing has been encouraging, and the Secretary of State for Defence recently signed a sort of memorandum of intent with the government of Qatar, for example, for the purchase of some more Typhoons and Hawks, which of course will be of help to BAE.
Labour Shadow Defence Secretary was on the programme earlier. She suggested that you bring those Hawk orders forward to save these jobs. Is that possible?
Well, it's not an order from us. It's an order from another government. So it's up to them how they deal with that.
Final quick one from Mark. If you were stuck on a desert island, which one of your cabinet colleagues would you most like to have keep you company? Note I didn't say which one you wouldn't like to have to keep you company.
Now, this is going to be one of those terrible questions. But you know what? The name that first went through my mind, and maybe it's just because I've had a bad cough, is perhaps Dr. Liam Fox would be very practical.
I'm sure he'd be delighted. Prime Minister, thank you very much. Hope you'll come back in the future to take some more calls from our listeners. That's the Prime Minister, Theresa May there. We'll get your reaction to what she's been saying over the last 40 minutes or so in just a moment. Keep your calls coming, 0345 6060 973.